The alien doctor stood over him, her advanced medical equipment scanning his lifeless body. The human male was supposed to be dead. His vital signs had flatlined hours ago. She sighed in disbelief, unable to comprehend how he had held on for so long. Her species had seen countless humans perish, but none like him. They didn't fight back like he had. They didn't survive after such intense trauma. He should have been gone by now, but his stubborn will to survive defied the odds. As the doctor prepared to mark him for disposal, a low, raspy laugh escaped from his lips. At first, she thought it was some sort of mistake, a glitch in her equipment. But the sound grew louder, more distinct. The man, whom she had believed to be dead, stirred. His hand twitched, and his eyes flickered open. He looked around, confused but strangely defiant. "What's going on?" he muttered, his voice rough from lack of use. The alien doctor froze, not understanding what was happening. She had seen humans endure pain, but never had she witnessed one come back from the brink of death like this. His eyes locked onto hers, a mischievous glint flickering in them. "Not today," he said, the words filled with unexpected strength. The doctor's hands trembled as she looked at him. She had studied every corner of the galaxy, but she had never encountered anything like this before. How was he alive? How could he defy death itself? She had seen warriors, but none like this human. The room was eerily silent, the only sound coming from the steady hum of the medical equipment. The human slowly sat up, his movements sluggish but determined. He looked down at his own body, a sense of disbelief crossing his face. How was he still breathing? How had his heart restarted? His mind raced, and for a moment, he considered the possibilities. Could it be that something inside him had changed? Was it some form of alien technology? Or was it simply his own willpower that had brought him back? The doctor stepped back, still unsure of what to do. This was unlike anything she had ever seen. With a grunt, he forced himself to stand, his legs wobbly beneath him. The alien doctor continued to stare at him, her confusion deepening with each passing second. She had seen species come and go, but humans? They were unpredictable, stubborn, and apparently impossible to kill. He smirked as he noticed the look in her eyes. She was trying to figure out what made him so different from all the others. "Guess you thought I was a goner, huh?" He laughed, though it was clear he was struggling to keep his balance. The doctor's eyes narrowed as she analyzed him further. Her scanners showed nothing abnormal, nothing that could explain this sudden recovery. She had no answers, and it frustrated her. Humans were supposed to be weak, but here was a man who had proven her wrong. The human's mind was still reeling, but he felt a surge of determination that pushed him forward. He had been in situations before where survival seemed impossible, but somehow he had made it through. It was his will to live, his drive to fight, that had pulled him back from the edge of death. This was just another battle, another challenge that he would overcome. He could already feel the strength returning to his limbs. He wasn't just a survivor, he was a fighter. And he wasn't going down without a fight. The alien doctor watched as the human slowly regained his footing. She had seen countless species, but none had ever left her this speechless. He had been declared dead, yet here he was, alive and well. She had underestimated him, and now she wasn't sure what to make of him. Could this be the beginning of something new, something more dangerous than she could comprehend? The doctor was left with more questions than answers. The human steadied himself, his eyes locked on the alien doctor. The room was thick with tension as he took a deep breath. He wasn't sure what had just happened to him, but one thing was clear. He was alive, and he wasn't going to waste this second chance. He had survived battles, sickness, and pain. But this felt different. He felt stronger, more determined than ever before. The doctor watched him closely, her advanced medical equipment still scanning his body. She couldn't understand it. Humans were fragile, easily broken, but this one, he had come back from the dead, She took a hesitant step forward, unsure whether to approach or retreat. She had studied human anatomy for years, but this was something she had never encountered before. Was this a fluke, or was there something more? She needed answers, but she didn't know where to start. What happened to me? The human's voice was steady, though his body was still shaky. He was trying to understand, trying to process the impossible. The doctor didn't know how to answer. She had no words, no explanation. How could she explain something that even her technology couldn't decipher? Instead, she just stared at him, helpless in the face of his resilience. For a moment, the two of them stood there in silence. The human tried to steady his breathing, his thoughts racing. He had no memory of what had happened to him, no recollection of how he had ended up in this place. All he knew was that he had been on the brink of death, and now he was alive again. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers. They felt strong, more powerful than they ever had before. His mind kept returning to one thought. Why? Why had he been given this second chance? And what did it mean for him now? "You can't be serious," he muttered under his breath, half to himself. He didn't expect the doctor to answer. Her expression was unreadable, but he could tell she was just as puzzled as he was. He needed to know more, needed to understand how he had pulled through when all hope seemed lost. He had survived, but why? What had made the difference? He could feel the weight of it all, a pressing question that hung heavy in the air. It was almost like the universe was testing him. "I should be dead," he said, more to himself than to her. His voice was low, filled with a mix of confusion and wonder. He had been close, so close to dying. But here he was, standing, breathing, alive. How? Why? What had happened in those final moments? The doctor stood motionless, her sensors flashing rapidly, her mind racing. She had never encountered a human like this before. None of her data made sense. He was an enigma, a puzzle she couldn't solve. And yet, the thought of him being more than just a survivor made her nervous. The human shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He needed answers. He needed to understand what had happened. He couldn't just walk away from this, not when. Everything about it felt so unnatural. He glanced at the doctor, who still hadn't spoken. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the uncertainty. She had never seen a human like him, and she didn't know what to make of it. He had to get out of there. He had to keep moving, keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. "You're right," the human said, his voice firm now. "I shouldn't be here, but I am, and I'm not going anywhere." His words were a promise, one that he would keep. He wasn't about to let whatever this was stop him. He wasn't just going to sit around and wait for answers. He had been given a second chance, and he was going to make it count. He wasn't sure what was happening, but he was ready to face whatever came next. The doctor stared at him for a moment, then glanced down at her equipment. Her scanner showed nothing unusual, no explanation for what had just happened. She couldn't deny what she had seen, but she couldn't explain it either. It was as if the human had somehow cheated death. But how? And why? These were the questions that haunted her, questions that she had no answers for. The man before her was not like the others. He was something more. He took another step, his body still unsteady, but improving with each movement. The doctor watched him, her mind racing. She had seen soldiers, warriors, and survivors before, but none had the same fire, the same determination that this human had. It was as if his very will to live had forced him to come back from the brink of death. She couldn't help but wonder what kind of power lay within him. "You're different," the doctor finally said, her voice barely a whisper. The human stopped, his gaze meeting hers. "I know," he replied simply. "And I'm not done yet." With that, he turned and walked toward the exit, his steps growing steadier by the second. The doctor stood there, still in shock, watching as the human walked away. The unanswered questions lingered in the air like a thick fog, clouding her thoughts. What did all of this mean? And more importantly, what was the human going to do next? The human stepped into the hallway, his legs trembling beneath him. He could feel the weight of the doctor's gaze still on him, but he didn't turn back. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. His mind raced, with possibilities, trying to make sense of everything. Why had he survived when all hope was lost? What had caused him to defy death itself? The answers seemed out of reach, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't stay here. He had to move forward, wherever that led him. He walked down the sterile, metal hallway, each step growing more confident. His body was still weak, but the surge of energy he felt earlier hadn't completely faded. It was as if something inside him had awakened, and now it was pushing him to keep going. He couldn't explain it, but he didn't have time to figure it out right now. He needed to get away, to find some answers. Something deep inside told him that there was more to his survival than chance. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, but he ignored it. There was no time to waste. As he walked, the hum of the ship's engines grew louder. He passed several closed doors, each one marked with strange symbols he couldn't understand. The technology around him was advanced, far beyond anything he had seen on Earth. His heart pounded in his chest as he wondered how long he had been out, how long he had been in this alien place. The last thing he remembered was a battle, a firefight, and then a thing. And yet here he was, alive and somehow stronger than before. He clenched his fists, the power inside him growing more intense with every passing second. He reached a control panel and hesitated for a moment before pressing a button. The door slid open, revealing a large chamber filled with glowing lights and strange machinery. The air felt thick with energy, and he could sense something different. Something powerful. He stepped inside, his mind racing with questions. What was this place? And why was he drawn to it? He had no idea, but his instincts were telling him that he needed to be here. He didn't know if it was fate or something else, but he knew that this was where he had to be. The chamber was filled with strange devices, many of them unfamiliar to him. Some looked like weapons, others like medical equipment. They all seemed to pulse with energy, their surfaces humming softly. The human walked carefully toward the center of the room, his eyes scanning every corner. He had no idea what he was looking for, but he could feel that something was calling to him, pulling him forward. The room seemed to be alive, as if it was reacting to his presence. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and his senses sharpened. As he moved deeper into the room, his foot brushed against a strange object on the floor. He knelt down to inspect it, his fingers tracing the smooth surface. It was a small, metallic device, unlike anything he had ever seen before. The markings on it were alien, etched into the surface with intricate precision. He held it in his hand, feeling its weight and energy. It hummed softly, almost as if it recognized him. His breath caught in his throat as he realized that this device might hold the key to everything. He didn't know what it was, but he knew it was important. It felt like it was meant for him. Suddenly, the door behind him slammed shut with a loud clang. He spun around, his heart racing. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the glow of the chamber's lights. It was the alien doctor. Her face was a mixture of concern and determination as she walked toward him. She had been watching him, no doubt, trying to figure out what made him so special, so different. The human didn't know what to make of her. But one thing was clear, she wasn't going to let him go easily. She had questions, and he had answers she wanted. "Stop," she commanded, her voice firm. "You don't know what you're doing." The human didn't move. He stood there, his grip tightening on the strange device. He could feel the power within it, and something inside him told him that he needed to hold on to it. He wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice steady. The doctor stepped closer, her expression serious. She was trying to understand him, to figure out what made him tick. But he wasn't going to let her control him. Not now. Not when he was so close to finding the answers he needed. The doctor paused, her eyes scanning him carefully. She seemed to be weighing her options. The human wasn't like any other being she had encountered. His strength, his will to survive, it was almost unnatural. She had no explanation for it, no logical reason for why he was still alive. But she knew that if anyone could find the truth, it was him. And somehow she felt drawn to him, as if their fates were intertwined. She couldn't let him leave, but she also couldn't stop him. He was different, and that scared her. You don't understand, she said, her voice softer now. There are forces at play here that you can't control. The human turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. I don't need to control anything. I just need to survive. His words were simple, but they held a weight that made the doctor pause. He wasn't going to back down. And neither was she. The doctor stood in front of the human, her posture rigid. She could see the determination in his eyes. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered before. Most beings, when faced with death, would simply accept it, but this human had refused. He had defied the odds, and now he stood before her, stronger than ever. She didn't know what to make of it. She had spent her entire life studying the complexities of life and death, but this human? He was an anomaly, something that her knowledge couldn't explain. She crossed her arms and took a deep breath. What do you think you're doing? She asked, her voice calm, yet tinged with concern. The human didn't look at her. He continued to stare at the strange device in his hand, as if it held the answers he had been searching for. I'm trying to figure out what's happening, he replied, his voice steady. Why am I still here? What's going on? He turned his gaze toward her, his eyes filled with a mix of confusion and frustration. The doctor shifted her weight, still unsure how to proceed. She had never encountered anything like this before. In all her years of studying different species, she had never seen one so relentless. She had seen creatures with great strength, but none with the same fire that burned in this human's chest. It was as if he had tapped into something beyond himself, something far greater than she could understand. You've survived. Yes, she said slowly, but that doesn't mean you can control what happens next. There are forces here that you cannot understand. The human's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the device. Then teach me, he said firmly. I want to understand. I need to know what happened to me. The doctor hesitated for a moment. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, but she also saw something else, a dangerous level of confidence. She wasn't sure if it was arrogance or something else, but it made her uneasy. She stepped closer to him, her mind racing. The human was right in one way. If anyone could help him understand what had happened, it was her. But she wasn't sure she wanted to be involved. He was dangerous. Not because he was violent or aggressive, but because he was unpredictable. She had seen what he was capable of as survival against all odds. But what if he was more than just a survivor? What if he had become something else, something beyond her control? It was a terrifying thought, and she didn't know if she was ready to face it. The human stepped closer, sensing her hesitation. You have answers, don't you? He said softly. You know something, don't you? The doctor met his gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to say no, to tell him that she didn't know anything, but she couldn't. She knew too much. She had seen too much. I know, she whispered, but I'm not sure you're ready for what I have to tell you. The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded with meaning. The human's eyes softened, his expression growing serious. Tell me, he said quietly. I need to know. The doctor hesitated once more, then let out a long breath. There was no turning back now. She had no choice but to reveal the truth. You're not like the others, she said. You never were. There's something inside you, something that shouldn't be possible. You survived because you're more than just a human. You're different." The human's heart skipped a beat. He had suspected it, but hearing it from her made it feel more real. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "There's a force inside you," the doctor continued, her voice growing softer. "A power that goes beyond the natural order. It's part of you now. It's why you survived." The human felt a chill run down his spine. He had known there was something different about him, something that set him apart from others, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. "How?" he asked, struggling to find the words. "How did this happen to me?" The doctor shook her head. "I don't know. But I do know that this power, whatever it is dangerous. It's something that can't be controlled, not by anyone, least of all you." Her voice was firm, yet there was a hint of fear in it. The human felt a surge of confusion and anger rise within him. He had always prided himself on his strength, on his ability to overcome the odds. But now it seemed that he was being told that he wasn't in control anymore, that something else was calling the shots. He clenched his fists, the device still in his grip, feeling the strange energy pulsating through it. "I don't care. If it's dangerous," he said, his voice hard. "I need to know what it is. I need to understand what happened to me." The doctor looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. She could see that he wasn't going to back down, not now. But she wasn't sure what that meant for both of them. "You're playing with fire," she warned. "And you don't even know it." The human didn't respond. He turned his attention back to the device, his mind racing with possibilities. He had been given a second chance at life, but at what cost? And more importantly, how long could he control it before it consumed him completely? The room was silent, filled only with the sound of the device's hum as it continued to pulse with energy. The unknown lay before him, and he had no idea where it would lead. But he knew one thing: he wasn't going to stop until he found the answers he was looking for. Asterisk. The human turned away from the doctor, his thoughts swirling with confusion and anger. The words she had spoken echoed in his mind. "You're not like the others. There's something inside you, something dangerous." He couldn't comprehend it. How could he be different? He was just a man, a soldier who had survived countless battles. But now, it seemed there was something more, something beyond his understanding. He clenched his fists, his grip tightening around the device as the strange energy inside it continued to pulse. The doctor watched him, her eyes filled with concern and caution. She knew what he didn't. She knew the true nature of the power inside him. It was a force that had been created in the depths of the galaxy, a force that could tear through worlds and destroy civilizations. She had seen it before, but never in a human. The thought of it terrified her. She couldn't allow him to fully realize what he had become. He wasn't ready. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she said softly. But the human didn't turn to face her. His mind was elsewhere, focused on the device in his hand. He could feel its power, a raw energy coursing through his veins, urging him to explore it, to use it. But he didn't know how. He didn't know if he could control. "Eat. I don't care what it is," he muttered under his breath. "I need to figure it out. I have to understand what happened to me." His voice was filled with determination, but the doctor could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. He wasn't sure if he could control it either, but he wasn't going to stop. "Do you think you can control this power?" she asked, her voice calm but with an edge of fear. The human finally turned to her, his eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I have to try. I can't go back to being weak. I can't go back to the way things were." He looked down at the device again, feeling its energy surge through his body. "This is my chance. This is my only chance." The doctor's heart skipped a beat. She had seen many beings struggle with the power he now possessed, and none of them had come out unscathed. "Don't make the mistake of thinking you're invincible," she warned, stepping closer to him. This power is like a flame. It can give you strength, but it can also burn you alive. You have no idea how dangerous it is to play with it." The human's gaze softened, but his resolve remained firm. "I know the risks," he said quietly. "But I won't let it control me. I'll control it." He looked back down at the device, his fingers running over its smooth surface. The hum it emitted was almost hypnotic, as if it was calling to him, urging him to tap into its power. The doctor took another step forward, her expression now a mixture of caution and something almost like pity. She didn't want to see him make the same mistakes that others had. She had seen too many beings destroyed by their desire for power. "I've seen this before," she said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "I've seen what happens when someone tries to control something they don't understand. It always ends in tragedy." The human remained silent for a moment, absorbing her words. He could feel the weight of them, but he wasn't sure he cared. The power inside him was growing stronger, and it felt too good to let go of. He didn't know how much longer he could resist it. "I don't have a choice," he finally said. "I've already been to the edge of death. I've already faced the impossible. This is my chance to change everything. I won't let it slip away." His voice was quiet, but filled with conviction. The doctor looked at him, her eyes searching for any sign of doubt, but there was none. He was resolute, willing to risk everything for the power that was now coursing through his veins. "You're making a mistake," the doctor whispered, her voice barely audible. "I can't stop you, but I can warn you. The power you seek, it's not something you can control. It will consume you if you're not careful." The human looked at her, his eyes unwavering. "Then I'll burn. But I won't go down without a fight." The doctor swallowed hard. She could see the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had kept him alive when he should have been dead. He was dangerous, but there was something about him, something she couldn't explain, that made her want to believe him. Still, she knew the risks. The consequences of failure would be catastrophic. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The human stood there, gripping the device in his hand, his thoughts swirling. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the energy that surrounded him. He could feel it in his blood now, like a living thing. It was part of him, and he was beginning to understand its potential. But as the doctor's words echoed in his mind, a question lingered. Was he making a mistake? Was he playing with fire that could destroy everything? He wasn't sure, but one thing was clear: he couldn't stop now. Not when he had come so far. Not when he had survived the impossible. The doctor turned away, her heart heavy with worry. She knew there was nothing more she could say. The human had made up his mind, and now they would both have to live with the consequences. Asterisk. The human stood in the center of the room, feeling the energy of the device surge through his body. It was a strange feeling, unlike anything he had ever experienced. The power was almost alive, thrumming within him as if it had a mind of its own. His heart raced, but he refused to be afraid. He had faced death before, and he had come out the other side stronger. Now this power, whatever it was his to command. It felt like destiny, as if the universe had handed him this gift or curse. He didn't know which it was yet, but he was determined to find out. The doctor watched him, her eyes filled with worry. She had never seen anything like this before. This human had already defied death, but now he was on the edge of something far more dangerous. She had hoped to contain the power, to keep him from fully awakening it, but it was clear now that it was beyond anyone's control. The energy surrounding him was growing stronger, and the air in the room crackled with its intensity. She stepped back, unsure of what to do. She had warned him, but now she feared it was too late. "Stop," she said firmly, her voice tinged with desperation. "You don't know what you're doing." The human didn't respond. His hands clenched the device tighter, and he could feel the energy flowing through him, filling every part of his being. It was intoxicating. It felt like power itself, and he couldn't get enough. He had spent his entire life fighting for survival, but now with this energy, it felt like he could do anything. The world felt small in comparison to the power he now possessed. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he replied, his voice cold and steady. "I'm taking control." The doctor's eyes widened as he raised the device, the energy around him swirling like a storm. She could see the danger in his eyes, but she couldn't stop him. The power was too strong, too overwhelming. She had never seen someone so consumed by their own potential. He was becoming something else, something she couldn't recognize. The doctor could only watch as the human embraced the power with open arms. The human's body began to glow with an unnatural light, the device in his hand humming louder, resonating with the energy that coursed through him. The room seemed to pulse with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. He could feel it. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He had always known he was capable of more. And now, with this power, he could prove it. He could shape his own destiny. But as the light grew brighter, a shadow of doubt flickered in the back of his mind. Was he making the right choice? Was this power too much for him to handle? He pushed the doubt aside. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the strength he was gaining. The doctor took another step back, her mind racing. She had never wanted to see this, never wanted to witness the complete transformation of a human into something else. She had seen the effects of power before, seen what it could do to a being's mind, to their soul. The more he used it, the more it consumed him. It didn't matter how strong he was, it would eventually break him. She couldn't allow that to happen, not on her watch. "You don't understand," the doctor pleaded, her voice breaking through the energy surrounding him. "This power, it's not a gift, it's a curse. And it will destroy you." The human turned toward her, his eyes glowing with a fierce intensity. "I've already been destroyed," he said coldly. "I've already died. This power is my second chance, and I'm not going to waste it." The words stung the doctor like a slap in the face. She had been trying to save him, but now it seemed that the human had already made up his mind. There was no turning back. The human moved toward the door, his body radiating with energy. The doctor's heart raced. She couldn't let him leave. She couldn't let him walk into the unknown, carrying this power with him. "Please," she begged. "You don't know what you're doing." The human paused, turning his head slightly, but he didn't look back. "I know exactly what I'm doing," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "I'm taking control of my own fate. I don't need your help." With that, he stepped out of the room, leaving the doctor standing there, helpless. The door slid shut behind him, and the doctor stood in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of the situation press down on her. She had done everything she could, but it hadn't been enough. She had tried to warn him, tried to stop him, but he had chosen his path, and now she feared it was too late to save him. She had seen the destruction that power could bring, and she knew what would happen if the human didn't learn to control it. The consequences would be catastrophic. But there was nothing more she could do. She could only watch as the human walked into the unknown, carrying the weight of the universe in his hands. The human stepped into the corridor, the air around him thick with power. He could feel the energy pulsing through his body, every muscle, every cell alive with it. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and liberating all at once. He had never felt so alive, so capable. But as he walked forward, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of his mind. The doctor's words echoed in his head. "It's a curse. It will destroy you." He pushed them aside. He couldn't afford to doubt himself now. He had come too far. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. He wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. The human walked through the hallways of the ship, feeling the strange energy radiating from within him. Each step seemed to amplify the power that surged through his veins. It was as though the entire ship was alive, reacting to his presence, to the force that now controlled him. He could feel the eyes of the crew, though he had not seen any of them. He could feel their fear, their uncertainty. They were afraid of him. He didn't blame them. He was afraid of himself too. But he had no choice but to press forward. There was no turning back now. His thoughts raced. The power he had unleashed was both intoxicating and terrifying. He had been granted a gift, or perhaps a curse, and now he had to figure out how to wield it. The doctor's warning echoed in his mind. It will destroy you. He didn't know if it was true, but he wasn't going to let fear control him. He had always been a survivor. Now with this power, he could do so much more. The possibilities were endless, and that was both his strength and his weakness. He stopped at the control room, his hand hovering over the panel. He could feel the energy pulsing inside him, as if it was drawing him toward the ship's systems. He could almost sense how everything worked, as if the technology itself had become an extension of his body. He knew how to access it, how to control it. His fingers brushed against the panel, and immediately, the lights in the room flickered, responding to his touch. He smiled, the sensation of power overwhelming him. It was as if the ship had become his, and he was the master. But with that power came a responsibility, one that he wasn't sure he was ready to bear. He had already crossed a line, one that he could never uncross. The more he used the energy, the more he felt it change him. It wasn't just his body that was different. His mind was shifting too. He could feel his thoughts becoming sharper, clearer, but also more detached, more cold. The human warmth that had once defined him was slipping away. Was it worth it? Was the price of this power too high? He didn't know. But he couldn't stop now. The door to the control room slid open, and he stepped inside, greeted by a flurry of activity. The crew members at the console stopped what they were doing, their eyes widening as they saw him enter. They had heard the rumors, the whispers about the human who had survived the impossible. Now they were seeing the consequences of it. He could feel their fear, their uncertainty, and it fueled him. They didn't know what he was capable of, and that made him dangerous. One of the officers, a tall alien with bright blue skin, stepped forward. "What is this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "What have you become?" The human met his gaze, his expression hardening. "I'm what I need to be," he replied coldly. "I'm what I was always meant to be." The officer's eyes darted to the device in the human's hand, the one that pulsed with strange energy. "That thing, it's not natural," the officer said. "You're not like us anymore. You've changed." The human didn't answer. He didn't need to. The power inside him was all the answer he needed. The crew stood still, watching him, unsure of what to do. Some were afraid, some were curious, and some were already plotting their next move. The human could sense their thoughts, their doubts, their fear. But it didn't matter. He wasn't here to make them comfortable. He wasn't here to ask for their approval. He was here for one reason: to take control. He wasn't going to let anyone stand in his way. "I'm in charge now," he said, his voice low but commanding. "This ship, this crew, it's mine now." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The officer who had spoken earlier looked uncertain, but the others seemed to take his words at face value. The crew knew that they had no choice but to obey. The human wasn't just a survivor now, he was a force to be reckoned with. And they could feel the weight of that power in every moment they spent in his presence. The doctor's warning flashed through his mind again. "It will destroy you." The human pushed the thought away. He couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. Not when everything was within his grasp. He had survived the impossible, and now he would thrive. He had been given a gift, and he wasn't going to waste it. He could feel the universe bending to his will, and he was only just beginning to understand what that meant. He wasn't going to stop. Not now, not ever. A voice broke through his thoughts. It was the officer again. "What do you want from us?" he asked, his voice strained. The human looked at him, a faint smirk crossing his face. "I want control. I want answers. I want to know why this power is inside me, and I will do whatever it takes to get those answers. But if you're not with me, you're against me." The officer swallowed, his eyes flicking nervously to the other crew members. He knew what the human meant, and the others knew too. There was no room for hesitation now. The human turned away, his eyes scanning the room one last time. The crew had already begun to whisper among themselves, but he didn't care. They would follow him. They had no choice. He had been reborn, and now he would shape his future, and the future of those around him. The power was his, and nothing would stop him from using it. Not fear, not doubt, not even the doctor's warning. The universe had given him a chance, and he would take it. The human stood before the control room's central console, his fingers hovering over the interface. The power that coursed through him was now a part of his every action, every thought. It was as though the ship, the crew, and the very universe had become his to command. He felt like a god, with the ability to shape reality as he saw fit. The intensity of the energy inside him had only grown stronger with each passing moment. It was as if the power was alive, feeding off his will, and in turn, his will was becoming stronger. He looked around at the crew who stood in silence, their eyes filled with a mixture of fear, awe, and uncertainty. They had been expecting a leader, a commander to guide them, but what they had now was something entirely different. This human, this man was no longer just a survivor. He was something far more dangerous, far more unpredictable. The crew could feel the weight of his presence pressing down on them, but none dared to speak out. The human's control over them was absolute. "Get to work," he commanded, his voice cold but firm. "I want the ship ready to move. We have a destination, and I intend to reach it. No more delays." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 lives. The crew hesitated for a moment, but quickly they began to move, following his orders without question. They knew that resistance would mean their end. The human's power was beyond anything they had ever encountered, and they would follow him, whether they wanted to or not. The human stood still, watching as the crew scrambled to carry out his instructions. His mind was focused, his eyes narrowed. In concentration, there was no time to waste. He had already wasted too much of his life. He had been given a second chance, and he wasn't going to squander it. He had been through death and come back stronger, but the true test was only just beginning. The power that flowed through him was still new, still unpredictable, and he wasn't sure how long he could control it. But he would keep pushing forward. He would master it, no matter the cost. As the crew worked around him, the human felt the urge to test his power. He reached out with his mind, tapping into the ship's systems. The control panel flickered, then hummed to life, responding to his touch. He could feel every system on the ship, every wire, every circuit. The ship was no longer just a machine. It was an extension of him. The hum of the engines, the lights that flickered overhead, the very walls, they were all connected to him, responding to his will. It was exhilarating, and yet, a part of him feared the consequences. He closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on the feeling, trying to understand it. The power inside him felt alive, as if it was aware of his thoughts, his intentions. It was feeding off his desire for control, for domination. He could feel its pull, but he resisted. The doctor's warning echoed in his mind. This power will destroy you, but he ignored it. He couldn't afford to think like that. Not now, not when everything was within his reach. He had come too far to turn back. The power was his, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. When he opened his eyes again, he could feel the presence of the crew members around him. They were watching him closely, some with awe, others with fear. But none of them spoke. They knew their place now. The human was in charge, and there was no question about it. He had taken control of the ship, of their lives, and they would follow him, whether they liked it or not. The human didn't need their approval. He didn't need anyone's permission. He was the master of his own fate. "I want a full scan of the galaxy," he said, his voice steady. "Find me the nearest planet with resources we can use. We're not sitting idle anymore. We move forward, and we do it on my terms." The officer who had once questioned him nodded quickly, though the fear in his eyes was evident. He had seen the human change, seen the power grow, and he knew that defying him was not an option. He turned to his console, typing in commands at a rapid pace. The human watched him, his eyes cold and calculating. "You're not just a survivor, are you?" the officer muttered as he worked. The human didn't respond immediately, but when he did, his voice was low, almost detached. "No, I'm more than that. I'm a force." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that made the officer pause. The human wasn't just a man anymore. He wasn't just a soldier. He was something else, something beyond anything the officer had ever known. The human turned away from the officer, his gaze sweeping across the room. The crew was working swiftly now, each member focused on their tasks. They had no choice but to obey him. He could feel their fear, but it didn't matter. He didn't need their respect, only their compliance. The ship would be his tool, and he would shape it, shape everything into what he wanted. He wasn't just alive now, he was unstoppable. Nothing could stand in his way. The universe itself seemed to bend to his will. He walked toward the large viewport at the front of the room, his hands clasped behind his back. The stars outside seemed to stretch on forever, an endless sea of possibilities. And within that endless expanse, he knew he could carve out his own destiny. There was no one left to stop him. He had the power, he had the strength, and now he had the universe in his grasp. The galaxy was his to command, and nothing would ever be the same again.